turn it over to you, Tim, for us to get started. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Martha. Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Reinert, as Martha mentioned, and I'm going to do my best to moderate these two crazy talented musicians that we have here today. We're very fortunate. Jodi and Matthew have a very diverse backgrounds in terms of what they've accomplished, and they're about as different as you can imagine in terms of the paths that they took to get here. And so I think we're very fortunate to have them both today. And if you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask them in the chat function, and we'll see where we can maybe squeeze those in here and there. I'm going to do my best not to talk too much, because when you have people who know what they're doing, like Jodi and Matthew, having a dumb schlub like me get in the way is kind of silly. So what we're going to do is we're going to start just to kind of get to know Jodi and Matthew a little bit. We're going to ask them about recent projects that they've been working on in the last year. So Jodi, we're going to start with you, and I wanted to ask you to maybe walk us through this new digital platform that you've created and what the motivations behind doing that were and what that's been like and the successes and I won't say failures, because jazz musicians never fail at anything. So there won't be any of those to talk about, but maybe some of the challenges and some of the stuff you've had to go through.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank everyone for the invitation to be here today. I'm deeply honored to be on this panel and to have this conversation. I feel like I'm a little bit of a young, youthful energy around this topic, because I'm new to this. So I'm coming at it from a point of view of life has hit us. And I took the opportunity to sort of embrace not what we can't do, but what we can do. And of course, everything went online. So in that process, in the past year, I have learned a lot about a lot of different things. I'm still learning. I'm excited to keep learning. But in a nutshell, I think all of the artists found ourselves in this really interesting situation when the pandemic hit, which was the thing that we had sort of relied on and anchored our whole careers on, which is getting in a room and performing with and for people, was taken away from us for a bit. And it kind of caused a bit of, I think, an existential crisis for a lot of people. Like, well, if I don't perform, what do I do? And I mean, I do a lot of teaching as well, like a ton of teaching and workshops and being in the room and, creating community with groups of people in spaces and places. And what I realized, though, is that through all of that experience of teaching in classrooms and in workshops and in doing clinics and adjudicating, is that I had a lot of knowledge, basically, that I had amassed over the years. And some of it was actually digital, some PowerPoints, PDFs, things I had created over the years. Not to mention all of the recordings and the videos and and also I had set up my social media platforms and all that. So I realized pretty quickly that I had stuff I could actually share online, and that everybody was online right now. So there was an opportunity that sort of showed up. And it was really through the VSO School of Music where I teach. They said, "What do you have anything we can pivot to online, because we can't do ensembles? What are we going to do? We want to keep people engaged." And I went, "Oh, I actually have all these courses I've taught over the years at the university, and maybe we can do them online." So the interesting thing was, I thought, who's going to want to do that? But lots of people wanted to do that. In fact, some of the webinars, we did one about pivoting to digital teaching and amassed a bunch of different tips and tricks and apps and everything. We had over 250 people from all over the world sign up. I mean, this was right as everyone was heading into teaching. Again, timing is everything, right? And I'm realizing the entrepreneurial spirit is really important, especially in this business, which we don't talk enough about in the arts world at all, because it seems like there's this dichotomy between artists and entrepreneur. But I really started to realize that there's artistry and entrepreneurship, and artists really take opportunities to find things. We like hunt and gather and maybe make a song, but there's also hunting and gathering and finding an opportunity and a new platform, or I can create this new stuff in a new way. So to make a long story short, I started teaching online, and a whole bunch of people signed up for history classes and guided listening. I taught some improv online, and what was interesting was that a lot of my ways of cultivating community, I was actually able to translate into the digital sphere. I had to find creative ways to do it, but when you prioritize that, it is possible. So I was like, oh, this is really working, and we're building this community. So as that was I was experimenting around that, I suddenly realized this is a thing. And there were people from all over the world or the province chiming in and showing up. People who had never been able to come to a bass lesson or even a concert, in Whitehorse. We had some folks from Whitehorse or from Nelson or from the Vancouver Island or from small islands. We're diving in and joining in online. So to make a long story short, other people were thinking this way. I had found a partner in an old dear friend named Amanda Tosaf, who's a teacher at Humber College and a pianist and a great composer. And she attended one of my webinars, and we got talking about education. And then we found a third partner, and we said, you know what? There are these platforms that you can actually build coursework. You can, have this sort of a hub. And then I realized that one of the things with the digital world that was a little alarming was this idea of you make stuff and it flies off into the universe, and you kind of lose not control of it, but you lose sort of what's done with it or how it's used or who's downloading or what's it used for. Whereas if you have a little container that you bring people to, like come hang out at my house, digital house, it was an opportunity to really curate carefully and slowly build community with like-minded folk who were into the thing you were into, instead of just doing live streams online all the time or whatever, sort of that who knows where we're landing or hitting. So we built a platform called Music Arts Collective, and we started offering webinars and doing live streams and guided. And then from that, all this stuff started happening because everyone was looking for people who could create digital content, effective digital content really, really easily. And we've done consultation work for school districts, produced some music festivals, like online education festivals, professional development stuff. I've done a series for some libraries online. And it was, an unbelievable year. And it was all like kind of mice on ice, like, let's just get this happening and got to figure things out as we go and, improve as we go. So that's basically the story. And it's just the beginning. So these seeds were planted during this time, and it's got me thinking of everything in a whole new way. So yeah, musicartscollective.com. So that's our new hub. And I think there's actually some folks on here who have attended some of those webinars. So we record them, and then they live on the hub in perpetuity with all the guided listening or the PDFs and that kind of thing. So yeah, so it's the beginning of a whole new adventure.
Oh, and Angela just kindly put up the link right on the screen. So thanks very much, Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi. Matthew, tell us a little bit about this festival. I find this story fascinating, and what the last year has been like for you with that, and maybe some of the other projects you've been working on.
Sure. So my music went multi-platinum over in Southeast Asia about 20 years ago or so. And so I found myself really occupied with that part of the world. Eventually I wound up moving there. And in the last few years, I've been kind of getting myself back home here to the Yukon again, because it's a great place to unplug. I remain pretty renowned and easy to spot on the street. And here I'm people know me, but it's in a community way, and that's nice. So the reason I explain that is the Yukon was the place where I would come back to get off the stage and produce stuff. And so when COVID hit, I had already kind of set up my studio here again, and immediately recognized, first of all, the need of our own local musicians, many of whom I know very well, I've known for a long time. And I have a relationship with government. I have a good relationship with the Yukon Arts Center. And I saw this crisis unfolding where musicians who, a lot of them just kind of survive gig by gig, month by month. And a sudden sort of lockdown is like, what, and so I thought, immediately that there was an opportunity to use the empty Art Center stage, and we could create a concert series, which we eventually turned into 20 solo concerts, with a third of those actually being done in the communities. We worked, over the phone and the internet to figure out how to do that, because they couldn't come into Whitehorse, so we didn't want to exclude. But basically, we created this beautiful 20 concert series, not only to benefit musicians, but to benefit technicians who are equally as hit, to benefit the Art Center, who was suddenly they had this big empty stage and no content. And at the time, the vibe, if we remember, back then, it was really weird. And our live streaming from the Art Center was people would gather, and everybody knows each other pretty well up here, especially if you're into the arts. And so it was this gathering place every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And it was a real kind of I don't know if it was healing, but it was certainly a bit of a life jacket tossed out to people who were just feeling isolated and weirded out by what was going on. And I made a point of making sure that we paid musicians well and technicians well, because I feel like, live performers are just underpaid a lot. And the other thing that was important for me was equality. So we worked with the Yukon Film Society and some local videographers to get really good quality gear in there. I worked with a guy who's pretty slick on streaming. And so he was the guy in charge of that. And so we were able to deliver really good quality stuff with the Yukon Film Society as a partner. And as far as the rights went, a lot of the work I do from the very beginning has been involved with culture, environment, Indigenous culture. And I've always made a point of, if I'm going to go record an Indigenous performer for use in a project, to make it clear that whatever I record belongs to you, and I will pay you and therethrough license it for what I need. But any additional uses I want to do with this, I got to pay you for, and we got to renegotiate, and you can use it for whatever you want. We did the same thing with these Art Center performances. The series is called Not Close But Personal, and you can find that on Facebook as well as YouTube. Those concerts are still up, and we have provided the video and audio material to all the musicians. They own it. We license it. They can do whatever they want with it. And that became a really valuable tool for them as well to figure out how they're going to navigate. So that was a really, that was one important project that happened right away. And thanks to the Yukon government for just releasing funds really promptly to make that go down. The other thing that happened was the Atlan Arts and Music Festival is a local fest that happens in just a stunning, beautiful, super little, tiny, ultra remote little town at the end of the road on a glacier lake surrounded by mountains. And it's hosted a lot of very famous musicians and local players and not so famous. And they had all this funding for a festival that wasn't going to happen. So what they approached me after they saw the Art Center performances, and we decided to use their funding with the approval of their funding sources and convert that into a documentary about the festival. One reason is for a music festival of that size to survive this drought of live performance opportunity, they need to keep themselves relevant, remain near and dear in the hearts and minds of the public. And so what we did is I've been building this documentary around the recollections of the organizers and those artists that have performed the fest, half of which are local. The other half include Bruce Coburn, Danny Michel, Tom Jackson, like a lot of really, and so they contribute a song and a memory, and then we dovetail that with an organizer's memory of the same thing, and it's been so touching and really meaningful. And that's what Martha mentioned. We in pursuit of how we could craft an agreement for all these artists, that actually turned into a pretty cool document. And I think Martha mentioned that that's something that could be available to others. So that documentary project is ongoing, as are a number of other things, but I'll stop there and let us move on.
That's great, Matthew. Thank you so much. So we've heard from both of you about these amazing things that you've accomplished. And to hear you talk about these things, they were just things you did, and they were super easy, and everything just came just really, really simple and no problems whatsoever. And I'm sure that's maybe not quite accurate, and maybe you both had some probably significant challenges while accomplishing these tasks, which now, now that in some ways a lot of the worst of COVID might be behind us, it's kind of maybe harder to remember those parts. But Jodi, I'm going to start with you and maybe ask if what were some of the significant challenges you found? And now, obviously, not gigging is a pretty obvious one, but just in terms of trying to actually make this pivot, what came up that maybe you didn't expect to come up?
Great question. I think the biggest challenge was I was coming from like totally no experience. I didn't even know what Zoom was. Like a year and a half ago, I had no idea what Zoom was,
Right.
let alone anything about cameras, interface, microphones, how to even do like a proper PowerPoint, really, where you can utilize all the cool functions in there. How do you do animation and nice transitions? How do you embed music into it? How do you make sure the music sounds okay? How do you deal with like a disconnect between the piano? I would be playing the piano with a camera on it, but it wouldn't sync with what they were hearing through the, all of that streaming, the lighting, because you realize when you're doing this work on a computer or digital streaming, the quality of a YouTube channel now is like, whoa, and let alone cable, so in order to have people care or want to watch it, it has to be at a certain level for them to like sit there for an hour or an hour and a half.
And to
So
be
it was,
competitive.
and to be competitive with other people. Like, so yeah, I mean, we're dealing with, how do you connect with those people to get them to want to come and be part of what you're wanting to make? And for me, it wasn't just about like, I'm a nice person, come hang out with me. Like it really required that we dealt with like, how do we make it? Well, Matthew, it's like the quality of the microphone and how does it sound and how's the balance and what are the lights and how flowing is the conversation. And so it was just like jumping into hugely crazy new world. However, what was interesting was so much of what you learn to do really as an artist, a performer, a creative person, and an improvising musician like I am, actually had, it meant that when we did a conversation series online, I mean, I'm used to having conversations all the time with students, with people, so there were certain things that actually translated fairly well, although it took time to really learn how to do, like, how to be a good interview host, how to have flow in your your script when you're how to engage with people so you give them an opportunity to actually engage somehow. How do you invite them to engage through the chat, or what are the tricks to do that using Mentimeter? Or so it was just like the first, and it was scary. It was like nerve-wracking. And then you're talking to a screen. So you're looking at your screen and you're not even seeing the folks. So it was just, the psychological challenges were interesting. The technical challenges were really interesting. And I mean, we were DIY, like, how do I do graphic design? What platforms can I make, like, so for all the social media to let people know what's happening, making that look nice, making that sound nice. So learning how to edit video, edit music. Like I got into Sibelius more GarageBand and syncing like video. So yeah, I mean, the learning curve has been enormous. But the cool thing was I literally got up in the morning in my pajamas, made a coffee, came downstairs and sat in this chair for hours and hours and hours. And the thing that was interesting, which this is why I want to encourage anybody who's out there, like, it was really fun learning stuff, It was really, really fun to do. Scary at times and vulnerable, like, this is gonna suck and we're putting it out in the world for people to watch. But also, like, we're going to get better at this. And people, what I found too, I don't know if Matthew found this, but the audience were really, the clients who were coming, the students, they were really patient. They found it all fun. And if you were just like, I don't know what I'm doing now, everything's falling apart, they're like, it's fine, it's COVID. So it was actually a perfect time to try stuff. people were actually, I'm not always, sometimes people were a bit cranky, some consumers, but you handle that with like, here's your money back. Here you go. Totally cool. Like, yeah, I get it. You couldn't log on or there was a problem. So yeah. So those are the challenges. It's just learning how to do things you don't know how to do, and not being able to access or have any money. Like we were doing it, we have no money, so we had to learn how to do it ourselves. And so that's one way. I didn't have government funding, unfortunately. We tried a little bit, but it didn't work. They were like, no, it's not quite what and we're like, okay, well, we'll just learn how to do editing. And so yeah, those were the challenges for sure.
One thing that I have found in launching the various things that I've been doing over the last year is that it's amazing. Like if what I have found is if there's something that I'm struggling with, if there's something that I'm being challenged by, I'm amazed by how many people I know that know how to do those things. And the amount of talented people in my network and friend circle that I had no idea that person was a graphic designer, and I had no idea that person was a literal media expert with a ton of stuff that I never would have thought is even possible, and they're amazing. And that is one of the biggest things the best things out of this whole thing that I have found. It's just the amount of people with so much talent and just willing to share, and those challenges become really kind of in your rear view mirror. At least that's what I found. Matthew, I don't mean to interrupt or cut into your time. Tell us some of the struggles. I mean, you just like talked about these two massive festivals as if you buttered toast in the morning. I'm sure they were far more challenging than maybe you're letting on.
Well, first of all, Tim, you are never interrupting or cutting into my time. I love listening to what you have to say. I mean, I really appreciate what Jodi's talking about. And I actually have been kind of ranting about Jodi because I was so impressed in our pre-event chat about, I've always believed that if you want to make it in this industry, you need to apply your creativity as an artist to creativity in the rest of it, and find weird and, just always look for the solution or the unusual. Don't ever stop that creative imagination, because that, as Jodi mentioned, I mean, it leads you in a whole new kind of life path practically, And so, yeah, but you're right, Tim, we, in the beginning, the first challenges were, I'm really like a dog with a bone, and there's certain people that keep their distance, because when I believe in something passionately, I just won't take no for an answer. And I can be pretty tough to deal with if you're kind of fighting my frequency. And in the beginning, there was, a certain person in the mix of the very sort of, working out the details, that was really all about the problems and oh my Lord, what if this and what if that, and it almost scuttled the project. And I remember, I have to, like you said, it's hard to remember it really viscerally, but I remember how I was contemplating going down to the Yukon River and just jumping in the freezing water to kind of cool myself down, because I was just so overheated. But luckily, I've also found that if you're really passionate about something and you just know it's supposed to happen, it'll happen. Just the right people spin in, and there's a kind of a destiny. And I don't do things really ever for the financial motivation. It's always because there's something really good and awesome about it. Either it has deep meaning and it can bring about change or benefit, or it's just a really cool idea. Like for example, I'm really into binaural audio, and I've been pushing some new envelopes there and developing a new audio platform that works great over digital. And so I gave a master class to an arts university in the Netherlands, and we did the whole master class in binaural sound, which we figured out how to pull that off with Zoom, and that was a new thing. So that was an interesting challenge that led to a really cool deal. But about the concert series, I remember the issue came up, what about musicians in the communities? As I mentioned, originally we're just all about the Arts Center stage, but we couldn't bring them into Whitehorse at the time. And so we needed to protect them and Whitehorse from not encouraging cross-community traffic. So we, put a third of the shows out there in the communities. And I remember one of the musicians, Driftwood Holly, that was chosen by a selection committee, because I was also very careful to be an arm's length from who's going to benefit from this. That was important. And that selection committee consisted of some people that are musical and in the arts and others that are not, that are just arts appreciators, in order to really, avoid the clique and accusations of, hey, you don't like me for whatever reason. So one of the guys that was chosen was Driftwood Holly, and he was, there's a city here called Dawson City. It's actually a little town now. It used to be a big mining town, but it's infamous for its music festival. And yeah, Dawson City is a cool place, but West Dawson is on the other side of the river, and there's a ferry that goes back and forth every day. There's no bridge, and in the spring freeze up, and then the breakup. The breakup in spring and the freeze up in fall. There's a time where you can't get across, and it's just up to nature to determine when that ice clears, because you can't drive across on the ice and you can't use a ferry. Well, Driftwood Holly had we talked about what format to do this in and how to do with the audio. So I got the best results that I could then do some post production on. Well, he had this big old file on his phone, on his iPhone that he'd shot, and no internet connectivity that was strong enough to get it over here. And so I was calling, I remember calling the RCMP detachment saying, can you guys send a helicopter? This is a cool project and the show must go on, and I was not giving up. And luckily we never quite locked in the helicopter. That would have been a really cool story. But Driftwood Holly did find a neighbor with the satellite internet, and it took about 2.5 days to upload that file, but we got it into OBS and streamed it into Facebook, and that worked out great. And that's an interesting thing too, is the software we were relying on for the streaming is OBS, and you can use OBS software to trick Facebook and YouTube into believing that the file that's coming in is live streamed. And that was funny because we had some where people were in different locations in the same video, and everybody's like, how did you do that? How, what's it? Because, that's still the impossible goal with latency. Well, it's because we actually had pre-recorded it, done the post-production, and then streamed it live. But the nice thing about the live streaming, while it was a little deceitful maybe, is it still brought the community together. And the point is they can watch together and chat together, and it had that connectivity that was so central to everything. The final challenge, if I may, and I don't know, Jodi, if you can relate to this, is it's been so busy. I just got pulled into another music festival that slid off the rails, and I've been helping them, rescue that. I've had no time for my own music, and that's actually a challenge I didn't expect. I'm so busy with all this other stuff, grateful for it, but I really miss digging into my own composition, producing and performing. So I'm starting to reach out to those that I'm working with and saying, kind of miss the stage myself, and thinking about how to, because that's very nourishing and important, Jodi, I think, for us musicians, is to remain musical ourselves.
100%. It's been yes, it's hard to balance it all when you enter these new things. And I just, you get faster at stuff, but at the beginning things take even just doing a mailing list. I did my mailing list. It took me probably 3 hours to get all the links. So yes, the potential is amazing with the digital world. You can do beautiful work and promote your stuff. But at the end of the day, that's a huge challenge. I 100% agree that I'm hoping that over time things get faster and we get systems in place to because I think we're all just this is new and and the other challenge I know, so Tim, you probably have another question for us, but the other challenge to just speak about that is that when I would play, which did happen, I did a bunch of live stream concerts. I was so out of shape and not it was oh my gosh. So it was hard to go, okay, but I actually need to learn how to do this. I have to spend time on this. And there were a couple of projects where I did have a month to prepare because the music was really difficult. But And then it takes you a while to like, remember how to play, but you're playing for cameras, not for people. And you don't have a control over how it's being recorded ever. So you're like, I hope it's okay. And then, and then we were chatting about this, Martha, earlier with the, then who owns that recording that you just did for this festival? And if it's terrible, can you bury it forever after they live stream it? Because I have this fear that I'm going to die in some fiery crash or something. Everyone's like, Jodi's gone. And then someone's going to pull like the worst recording of me, and it's going to, people are going to share. I'm just like, no. Can I like pick the excerpt before like I die? I know that's a really dark way of thinking about it, but it is, it's hard. That part has been vulnerable. I would say all of it's been vulnerable. And then there's part of you that just has to go, you know what? It is what it is. It is what it is. And sometimes you have to let go and not worry so much and just trust that, whatever will be, will be. So yeah, 100%.
If I can just say,
we're going to just interrupt. Sorry, Matthew. We're just going to interrupt for a second. Martha's got a question for the two of you, I believe.
Well, you kind of raised it. I just thought it was you hit on the listening, sort of thinking about it as a spectrum from when this all started to where we are now, where we actually have built agreements that address who's going to control what for how long. But initially, that was not something that most presenters were prepared for by any stretch of the imagination. Because, when you think about the volume of performances, both music and otherwise, where, you're covered by the SOCAN license, the venue's got the SOCAN license, and really we don't have to think very much about anything else. Well, actually, when you get into a live streaming environment, which all of this at some level is, it's a different medium. Like you said initially, Matthew, it's film. You've got to consider a whole range of other issues. And also what happens after and who's going to own it and how does it go back to the artist? Because the other side of it is that in film, the idea that you wouldn't control the rights in perpetuity is also like, of course we're going to control the rights in perpetuity. So there were some tensions between where live performances were coming from to this other milieu where, hang on, you mean you're going to have it forever to do whatever you want? This can't work. And I think it's really important for any of the musicians that might be listening to this or ever listen to it, that they know that they can ask, if somebody puts a contract in front of you and is either expecting you to produce a thing that they're then going to stream, that you can make very clear and should, what happens afterwards, and that they're also paying you enough to do all the various bits that you spoke to, Jodi, all the various foundational pieces, the sound, I need a better camera, I need this, I need that in order to make it sound good. And then if it really comes out crappy, not that anything you ever do comes out crappy, but you may not want it. So you want to be able to get it back and try and delete it or whatever, I think there's a lot of richness there.
This
and I wonder,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wonder, has it gotten any better now that we're a year into this, right? When you're asked to do things like a hybrid festival like the Jazz Fest, how's that working,
Yeah, Matthew, do you want to speak to that? I mean, for me, I think at the beginning I was just sort of like stunned and I guess we'll live stream. And I didn't even really, which is, musicians, we tend to, I don't know, like, I guess this is fine. And there's a lot of trust sometimes that we maybe shouldn't have, but I sort of trust that people are well-intended. I would say that as we got going, I was a lot more vocal about who is doing the sound. Like I would ask who's doing the sound, who's doing the videography. And over the course of the pandemic, I feel like the stuff I was involved with got really high quality, like beautiful, that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of this. So it went from, oh God, to wow, we actually really created some beautiful art here. So I watched everybody kind of get it together as we went. So that's why, like, even, you know, the beginning of the pandemic, I remember the first online one I did, I hadn't played much, and I got huge, it was hot, it was like in the summer, and I got a huge blister midway, and we had prepared all this stuff, it was like solo bass stuff, and there was like blood all over, and I'm trying not to show how a pain I was, and my husband was looking at me like, are you okay? I'm like, we can't do this one, I can't play the head. And he's like, but you're smiling, is everything all right? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It was all like live streamed. I'm like, yeah, it was just gong show. But to answer your question, Martha, I think we're getting more together, more aware, for sure. And it's really important to ask if any musicians are here. And this is also why I created the hub. And I think Matthew talked, like, to own stuff, or to say, I want the video is mine too. I can put it on my YouTube channel if I so choose, so that maybe people will find this great performance coming to my YouTube channel, because that may monetize in time, who knows. But yeah, get the material so it's not just out there controlled by everybody else. And generally speaking, presenters have been fabulous, though, like really sensitive about all of this. No one is trying to it's actually harder with the people with random phones just in a club, like videotaping you. That's harder to deal with in some ways. Presenters want to promote good stuff and make it sound good, and so yeah. So you know, my advice is go try and get gigs with reputable presenters who care about the high quality. And there's lots around Vancouver. They've done a beautiful job. I have to say, you know. For sure. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that. It's gotten better. Yeah.
I think it's important to note here, just for those of us who are listening that are curious about how tough jazz bass players are, that when we did the section on challenges, Jodi didn't even mention the blood pouring from her hand.
Yeah, that's just
that
normal.
Just came up later. So that just gives you a little sense of how tough you need to be a jazz bass player.
I know I look like the girl next door, but I'm actually a really tough chick. You have to be to play bass. Yeah,
so Angela's, Matthew, do you mind if we just move to Q&A? Is that okay?
Before you do, I wanted to say that we saw this problem coming with respect to live stream shows and musicians maybe feeling that they weren't at their best. And what we did was we burned into the contract that we had 90 days. We needed to have it online for 90 days, after which they could request to be taken down. And we did have a couple that asked for that. And I felt like that is, you're right, Martha, Jodi, that's an important thing, because a live stream, you know, it's not like the performances we're getting for the documentary where Bruce, Tom, Sarah, I mean, they can all take their time to get it right. Live streaming is what it is. And if you weren't at your best, you might not want that to remain.
Yeah.
I've heard that from a lot of musician friends, just how they go back to the early days of the live streaming scenario and just are cringing when they see stuff. And, you know, we talked a little earlier about how this is basically film. It's a totally different medium. And just like any medium, there are bad movies, there are bad films. And I think it took a little while for a lot of musicians and presenters to realize, oh, this isn't, you know, this is a different thing. It's not just putting a camera on a person. So Angela, actually, so we've got some questions. So Angela has reminded us that we've got Q&A now. We really only have like 14 minutes left. So what we're going to do is open the floor to questions, and we have one already from David. David, thank you. So David is asking Jodi, for GarageBand, did you have a live mentor? Did you find good digital mentors? How did you have any experience with GarageBand before? I'm sure you had a little bit at least.
Yeah, I mean, fooling around on it for sure. No mentors other than the help icon and Google. Just like, I don't know how to do this. But I have to tell you this one, like, that my pride and joy is Jazz FM in Toronto called and said, hey, do you guys want to be on International Jazz Day? You and your husband, you know, and chime in. I'm like, sounds great. We'll do a live thing. That's great. I thought it was like an interview. And then the day before they were like, oh, no, actually, we want you guys to play. And if you want to send a video ahead of time, feel free. And I was like, oh, God. Oh, like Jazz FM in Toronto. I'm like, oh, God. Okay. It was like, it's like the IKEA commercial. Get the cars, get the camera, get the GarageBand. So I set up my mic. We had his Nord. I put it all through the interface into GarageBand. He recorded on his phone, blah, 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 blah. Like we used, okay, now it's time. Can we actually pull this off and make it sound okay? So we had to go natural light in the kitchen and like clear the, you know, and it was awesome. We had like 5,000 or 6,000 views on the video. We just played a quick little tune. But I managed to almost sync it up really well. So, but I'm actually pretty proud of that little, you know, I clapped and I was just, but we had to get it in like fast. So I'm like under the gun. So I was like really proud of that because we had to do it with the phone, the stuff we had. It wasn't high tech, but the quality is quite good. I have it on my YouTube channel. You can go check it out. We played Love Walked In and it went viral. Like there was tons of shares. So it was awesome because it was like at the tail end, okay, how far have I come? I liked the bass sound. I liked the piano sound. It was good enough. You know, I'm not a professional. It's not professional, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But it has to be good enough that people go, oh, lovely. And not like, oh, skip, you know. And it has to look good enough. So it's, anyway. So I just wanted to share that story because it was a little triumph moment of me kind of coalescing all that I had learned. Again, just using GarageBand. I mean, my son has a better DAW, but I don't. And I had my one mic, which I was invested in, and it sounds great. So just add to that. So David, no, go Google and spend time just hanging out and exploring and playing. And that's what I did a lot of with the graphic design, with the video editing, with all of it. It's just like, I'm going to try this. And, you know, we're all smart folks. We can figure stuff out. And then we ask for help when we hit walls or we want to hit the next level. But yeah, do it yourself. DIY.
Until we get another question, and please, folks, if you have questions, this is the time to do it. Matthew, I'll ask you something similar. Did you find over the last year that you had technological challenges and if so, how did you? I mean, you talked a little bit about it earlier, and I do appreciate that. But you specifically, were there programs you had to learn, things that at this point now you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I never bothered with that before because now it's a lifesaver. Is there anything like that, a similar thing for you?
For sure. OBS was a new thing for me, but it's killer, really great program. The other thing that I had to get my feet wet in was DaVinci Resolve initially because it's free, and the free version is just, you know, a bit restricted, but it's the same interface as the pro version and it's great. So I highly recommend that. So I use that for video editing. That worked out really well. One thing I want to say that was a positive rather than a challenge is that the latest iPhones have just got killer video, and a lot of people have them or they can get a hold of one. And so when you need someone to do a remote shoot, of course, we've still been pushing for the audio separately. Therein, we sometimes get drift because if you've got two different devices recording digitally, they each have their own clock. And after about 10 minutes, they start to slide apart. So that's a challenge, but you just got to, you know, be patient and noodle it together and do your best. But learning those programs has been a challenge. YouTube is a just go-to, like, how do you whatever that should be the obvious thing in DaVinci Resolve, and it's like there's somebody showing you, and you know, it's like in 2 minutes I'm like, oh, okay, cool, you know, and I'm doing it, and so it's pretty amazing the resources that are just right at your fingertips with Google, YouTube, and yeah, and even if you're limited financially, DaVinci Resolve free was great. I work in Nuendo as an audio program. It's designed for post, and that's been very helpful that I already kind of was familiar with that. OBS is free, open source. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then there's all these other apps we've discovered, like a Chordy app for teaching. It's like cheap and amazing, and you can get like, it's like a digital, when it shows the chord, it shows this chord and the staff, it shows the chord symbol like all in real time. if you just hooked up through MIDI. I mean, the tips and tricks and things that you can use just in your computer already right now, free, like, and all the platforms for digital, like for creating design, like all templates and beautiful, like ready-made stuff. So I think that's the thing in terms of pivoting to digital and using digital platforms. And it sounds scary at the outset, but it's been a wonderful journey of learning, and I'm amazed at the high quality that we were able to do pretty quickly, and we still can keep going. It can get better, but I was comfortable with what we were able to create, whether it was on the platform or just like the videos and stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of investment. So amazing. It's amazing.
Okay. Please, folks, we still have a couple minutes. If you have a question, I'll move to my last question. Oh, we do have another question from David. David is asking if Jodi has listed these great app resources on her website.
David, you know what? I think you can download. You know what? We'll talk offline because you're my buddy. But on Music Arts Collective, we have two really good online courses. One is Great Online Learning 1 and Great Online Learning 2. If you download those webinars, they also come with PDFs of all of the apps that we've found. So there's apps for engagement for online teaching. There's apps for or what we use, like what interface did I use? What camera did we use? How do we use Zoom as a teaching tool? And then we had Sharantha Bedegay, who's the head of tech in the music faculty at Humber, do an incredible webinar about how he uses Sibelius. And I forget what it's called, but it's like a cloud recording software where people record into the cloud that's free. And people can do recordings in classes and stuff. We talk about Cordy app. So David, I would just head to Music Arts and download those webinars, and you'll get all the juicy info. See, look at me, juicy. I pivot to I know he's already on there, but come join the hub. We do all this stuff over there. So learning.
So we have a really great question from Stephanie, and it's probably going to be our last question of the day, I think. Mm-hmm. And it feels like more of a Martha question than anything else. So the question is, Martha touched on the difference in licensing and rights for live performance, specifically regarding SOCAN versus the rights and licensing you need for filmed or broadcast events. Are you able to expand on the difference and additional licensing requirements for the latter? I think this is probably more of a Martha question. And Martha is on mute.
Yes, I need the
we almost got to the very end without one of those.
Without a stump the lawyer question, and I need to really, I work a lot with performance venues and presenters, and also a whole range of artists, but my practice is not focused on music. For that, you really do need to speak to somebody who's immersed in it, like Andrew Atkins, who's one of our volunteer lawyers. At the same time, what I can say is, so, if you are the Vancouver East Cultural Center and you are presenting theater, dance, all kinds of performances, historically, the music was simply covered by the SOCAN license. SOCAN is a blanket license that covers all that. So you don't need to go to the trouble of getting specific licenses from the composer or the songwriter, and it's very simple. When things start live streaming, it's a very different ballgame, because suddenly your performers are not just live performers, but they're also potentially film actors, really. So they become subject to other collective agreements, like with ACTRA or UBCP here in BC. So so it's a more complicated environment right out of the gate. And then you've got situations where, like the one with that Matthew described, where you've got a music festival again who's used to contracting with artists to come and perform. They bring their equipment, their musical instrument. Thank you, word for coming at 4:27. They're in there somewhere, and playing, right? And then so they get a fee. They show up. They get a fee for showing up. Now you have to negotiate an additional fee structure. First, for the recognition that it's not a single performance, it's a stream that could be seen multiple times. So they have to build that into potentially a budget that doesn't really necessarily extend into that. And they have to consider, in the case of a documentary, that most documentary films, you have to have sync rights, you have to have them in such a way that they have to be super locked in. You will not get a broadcast license without basically having the producer control that everything about that is everything included in the documentary film, lock, stock, and barrel. And there again, you have musicians who are being asked to perhaps provide a license for not very much money for something that they lose control over, right? So in the case of the documentary that Matthew described, if they were to submit something for the documentary and that it gets broadcast, and then they see it and they go, ew, I sound awful, which is something that I think I've seen my share of awful sounding stuff. You sort of, the reality is that if they want to change it, they can't, right? Because they've signed away the rights, which is why like 90-day windows and timeframes can become really important when you're negotiating that license for artists. There might be like, well, I have to see it. Maybe they want to absolutely see the filmed live stream before they agree to make it available after the event for a couple of days, for example. There's all kinds of questions that suddenly, things that contractually made sense a year ago no longer make sense. And it has required quite a bit of, going back to hopefully in many, somebody with some legal drafting skills to help. But the reality is that a lot of small nonprofit presenters are bleeding money, first of all, right now, and have been since March of 2020. And the idea that they would be able to access a lawyer who would then, ipso facto revise their agreement to make it consistent with every possible use it doesn't happen that way. And so I've seen a variety of different ones. And I think the key, and I'll end my answer with this, is building relationships with artists. All of us are kind of in the same soup. I'm not talking, of course, about major record labels and major event. Yeah, when I don't deal with Live Nation, so I have no idea what they do. I think most of what I've seen from them is so egregiously proprietary as to like, it makes me want to hurl. So that being said, most people are doing the best that they can. And whether you're a small presenter or a new someone who's new to the game, so to speak, whether you're a musician or not, this is a really good time to ask questions and say, hey, what should I do? Are you comfortable with this? So there's a relatively small, well-established presenter in town, and they cobbled together an agreement, which actually, well, might not have all that legalese that people like me might actually like to see, but it kind of does what it needs to do. It says said really clearly, we're live streaming this, but we're not going to own it. And if there's any possibility of monetizing it, we'll have a conversation. And that's what we're going to do. So, which is a kind of pain from an administrative point of view. And it's a way of acknowledging to the artists that actually, yeah, maybe we'll try and do something with this, but we're going to talk to you about it when we're ready. And it's at that point that you maybe want some stronger language in there to protect both parties, not just the artist. And fortunately, we will have 2 templates available. One is very sort of music-y. The other is more for the situation of the presenter shifting to a different format, including documentary sync rights. But it's more, they're different. They're very similar but different. And we'll be making those available and letting everybody know in the next week or two. They should be made available as a guidepost. And then we have available through the artistlegaloutreach.com. You can book 30 minutes with Andrew Atkins for the price of a donation. And in the fall, in the winter, in January of 2022, we'll be opening our the first staffed legal clinic in the country with a staff lawyer who is with us today, River Shannon. And they'll be able to answer questions, if you have a question and you're just starting out and somebody's thrown a contract in front of you, so long as you're a low-income artist, there's River. We can try and help. And if we can't help, we'll make sure that you get to someone who can. That's the mission that we have right now, is to build out this first time in Canada legal clinic for the arts.
Okay, Martha, that's fantastic. Angela has been very kind enough to put some of the information that we've talked about on the chat function, and she's going to be sharing more of that later. And also a reminder to check out artistlegaloutreach.com and to check out what Jodi and Matthew are doing on the internets. They're both doing a lot of really interesting stuff, so please make sure you follow them and see where the next year or so brings them, because I'm sure that in the next year there's going to be all sorts of other stuff that they can report, and maybe we'll do this again. Okay, there's a head in the background. Matthew's got a head. That's
my future right there. Me
okay. And for the rest of you, a lot of you are going to be enjoying the Vancouver International Jazz Festival that started a couple hours ago. So if that is your particular poison, please enjoy that. It's going to be a great 10 days.
You bet. Really great. Yeah, thanks to the Coastal for inviting me to be part of the convo. Yeah.
Many thanks. This is great. This has been really great.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Martha.
Thanks for making this happen. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Matthew and Jodi.
Go check his new release.